my dad off, like they piss almost everybody off. He left and he got back in when I was in high school, and he bought me a course, an introductory course that I quite liked at the time. And, we didn't mention it to my mom. So after I did the course, I decided that I would wait to resume my involvement in Scientology till I was 18. I felt that was the honorable thing. The thing is, years ago under Hubbard's administration, you could leave the Sea Org after 6 years without a problem, without a quote unquote freeloader debt. And Miscavige put a stop to that.
To define the difference between the era of Hubbard and Miscavige, what way, how could you define that? I know you've talked about a few of the differences, but just to actually round that up, how could you define what was the major differences between both eras?
Well, so Hubbard created that billion-year contract probably, I think, before they went to sea. And basically, you're saying you're going to just live there. They call it their religious order, which annoys a lot of people because they're like, what's so religious about Scientology? But that's what they call it. They call it their religious order. And you're going to live there till you die. Or if you're too old and creaky and they throw you out on the street, listen to me. And eventually that's when I figured out that they didn't care about their members at all, but would continue to ask for money and time and money and time. And that's when I questioned it. But I had quite a few go-rounds with them, and they were successively more and more and more unpleasant.
Sorry.
I don't like the guy because the reason I disapprove of Cruz is mainly because he has hit staff, and he has said it's great that Miscavige hits staff. That's my biggest problem with him. No, Kat, sorry. That's what I have against him. I think he was so young when he got in. The other thing that makes me feel a little bad for him is that I can't even remember where I heard this, but I had heard that he was that he was backing away from Scientology when he was married to Nicole Kidman.
Guys, we're joined today by Claire Swazey and Holly Provencal. Claire is a ex-scientologist, and she's graced us with her presence today. How are you doing, ladies?
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Do you want to go
Glad
first?
to be here.
It's been a while since I've been on Ronan's podcast, but thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, listen, I just reach out to people, and some people get back to me and some people don't. But Claire did get back to me. We've been talking backstage. We've been talking for a couple of days now, and her story is mind-blowing. She's got some positives to speak about Scientology, some negatives to speak about Scientology. But before we actually speak about the Scientology part itself, we want to know a bit more about yourself, Claire. So
sure.
Why don't you brief us on where you're from, your early life and leading up to Scientology?
Sure. I'm from Albany, New York, which is the capital, and my parents were civil servants. And my dad graduated college when I was 10, so I got to go to his graduation, which was pretty cool. Not every kid gets to do that. And my dad got into Scientology when I was about 9. So I'd hear terms around the house, but my mom never liked it. So we continued to go to Catholic Mass every Sunday and every holy day of obligation. So I had mainly a Catholic upbringing. And then the cult pissed my dad off, like they piss almost everybody off. He left and he got back in when I was in high school, and he bought me a course, an introductory course that I quite liked at the time. And we didn't mention it to my mom. So after I did the course, I decided that I would wait to resume my involvement in Scientology till I was 18. I felt that was the honorable thing. And I was fortunate. The cult never made me disconnect from her. But then again, Miscavige wasn't at the helm then. And I'm not saying Hubbard was any angel. He was not. But things are exponentially magnified under Miscavige. So anyway, I went to a regular public school, and I've always been just a raging bookaholic. I love to read. It's just my thing. And my dad was interested in New Age thought and different things like that. And he also taught history. So his love of New Age thought is what led him to Scientology. And they pissed him off a second time and he left for good. And I eventually became volunteer staff. And then the cult blackmailed me into becoming contracted staff. And I was either 19 or 20 at that point. I was a very young adult. I was upset. They said there was no other way. I said, I already come here every day, and they said, no, you've got to cover yourself. And that was upsetting. But as time went on, I still had normal, ordinary office jobs in the finance industry. I met my husband at the cult. As I mentioned to you before, I sold him a Dianetics book. They used to put me on reception because I was young and blonde, and plus I didn't really know anything. So that was a good place for me. So they put me on reception, and people would come in and talk to me, and usually most would leave and not do anything. But my husband took the Dianetics book home. He was a young nursing student, and he thought it was just amazing. And he has always said to me, I thought they were going to do something. He thought they meant it when they said they were going to change the world. And many times he's told me over the years, he said they could have done so much by now, and they didn't do it. And so that was his thing. So we got married there, and I continued to have kind of a normal life. Like I could go out with my friends who weren't in Scientology. There's no such thing as, if you're in Scientology, you can't associate with non-members. If you're in the Sea Org, it's tough because most of them live on base and they can't really come and go as they want. But publics and local staff can go wherever they want. And if you want to see your Lutheran Aunt Mabel, you can see your Lutheran Aunt Mabel. So that's kind of a myth that I wanted to set straight. So anyway, we noticed that being on staff was, that the mission holder and her husband were tacky, ungrateful, and entitled. And so we said we wanted to leave, but not leave the cult. We thought the cult was still fine, and it wasn't, but we didn't know that. We were still in our very early 20s. So we said that we wanted to.
There's something that stands out there that you said about your dad. So your dad was in Scientology. He was there very early on.
Yeah, he was in the late 60s, and he did what was known as the quickie grades, which are grades are lower intermediate level auditing. And for a while, they were just moving people through with shortcuts, lickety split, like a hot knife through butter. And then later they're like, oh, well, we didn't do well enough and you're going to have to do them all over again. And the way the cult is they will not, they won't they won't reimburse you if they make a mistake.
Something stands out.
They're not Nordstrom.
Yeah. The thing about it is, whenever you were explaining this to me a couple of days ago, it was like that we're calling it a cult. We're calling it, a lot of people speak very negative about Scientology itself, but whenever you were speaking to me about it, it was like, well, your dad had a choice. He had a choice to be angry at Scientology. People would come in here and watch this and say, well, do you know what? If you're maybe you're a member of a very religious Jehovah's Witness cult or something along those lines, maybe a far right sort of cult or one of those things, those people can't leave. They're indoctrinated. Maybe they're physically restrained. But whenever you were explaining to me about your father's experiences, like he was able to get angry, he was able to leave. There was a sense of freedom within what you were saying. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, and it was for two reasons. The main reason being he was only a public. He wasn't even local staff, and if you're a public, all you got to do is stop showing up, except, they'll call you a lot and send you a lot of letters. And the other thing is that public still can walk out even now, but under Miscavige, there's a lot more skip tracing, nagging, threats, and coercion. And again, I am not trying to make Hubbard sound like a great guy, but it's sort of like you have a situation that's not too cool. Then somebody comes in and it goes from not too cool, or even bad, let's just say bad, to bloody awful. And that's what happened with Scientology. But it's always been easier for publics and even local staff because they go home every night.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe on that note, for the people who aren't sort of aware of what Scientology is, maybe they've just briefly heard about it, do you want to explain what the difference between sort of local staff is and or public to the likes of Sea Org?
Sure. It's whenever I compare it to any other established religion, people sometimes get a little upset. They're trying to say it's like that. It isn't like Catholicism, but if I was going to compare it, I'd say, look, you have Catholics who they go to church on Sunday, maybe they volunteer for certain Catholic organizations, but they go home every day. And then you have your religious orders, right? They are going to live in the rectory, the monastery, the convent, the abbey. They're going to live there. And so there's a difference right there. So in Scientology, most people are, you could cynically call them paying customers. I'd have no problem with that. Scientology calls them parishioners, which I find annoying because A, they're not Catholic or Church of England either, and B, they're not in Louisiana, which also has parishes. It's just stupid. But anyway, the publics are just people who are members. They pay membership dues, they take courses, they get auditing. They may even let their membership dues lapse from year to year because it's very expensive, but they still consider themselves Scientologists. Local staff, it's going to be like a smaller local branch, either a mission or an org that has introductory and maybe some intermediate level services. And those staff also don't live there. I think I'd heard rumblings of at one place that they were going to try to have a bunch of them live together, but and and when some ideal orgs have opened, they've had some Sea Org staff come and help. But other than that, as a normal course of events, what you have are people who are doing it either in the evenings after they get off work or during the day, and then they work at night because with what the cult pays, local staff can't really make a go of it. You have to have some other source of income, whether it's a pension, whether it's your trust fund, whether it's a day job. You have to, or you're living with your mom. In other words, if you were expected, if you wanted to fund a mortgage and utility payments and car payments on what C of S pays you, you could not do it. And so that's kind of the difference. And then you have Sea Org, which is actually the church's, the cult's management and administrative arm. And they sign billion-year contracts, ridiculous as it sounds. And most of them live on base. I've heard there's some exceptions, but the majority of them live on base. They can't go in and out as they please unless their job specifies it. So if you're just a regular Sea Org worker, you get a break and you decide that you're just going to go out, you're going to get stopped at the gate. And they sign a billion-year contract because they're saying, well, we're in this to win it. We're going to keep going till the whole universe is cleared, cleaned up, shiny as a new whistle, and we're just going to keep doing it. So we're going to have to keep reincarnating and coming back. I personally think most Sea Orgers, when they die and get free, are probably going to think, oh,
It sounds
never
great.
doing that again.
Claire, it sounds absolutely fantastic. You've sold it to me. I'll actually want to join. If they're going to clean up the universe, like honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, right? You've just told me that they want to clean up the universe. I too want to clean up the universe. But the thing about it is, what sort of is a deterrent is the billion-year contract, because something tells me when you sign that billion-year contract, you're selling your soul to the devil, if there is such a thing. But that's crazy to think, debunk a myth for me here. Is it true, and forgive me if I butcher this, is it true that they believe that like your fingers, your limbs are like individual people?
No.
I heard
I
that somewhere.
I think he's referring to body thetans.
Oh, okay. Well, there is sort of this story that a lot of members don't even know about because it's up on the OT levels, about a cataclysmic event and an evil galactic overlord named Xenu, and all these splintered souls end up occupying people. And that's really a hybrid of shamanism and Hubbard's crazy space alien stuff. And hey, I'm New Age. I like UFO stories as much as any New Ager. I really do. But I don't, of course, believe the Xenu story. Hubbard was taking a lot of drugs and he had some kind of crazy revelation about this. And that not only was it in his past, but everybody has it. Everybody has it. Everybody's been through the wall of fire. And that it's your body thetans. If you just say thetan, that just means soul or spirit. The body thetans are possessing you in part, they're influencing your thoughts. It would be like if the bacteria in our gut was somewhat sentient and not very rational. It's so that's what that is. But no, in general, members don't think that their limbs and extremities are separate beings.
Okay, well
Really.
then, well then, how about this here? So before we dive into your story a bit more, because I've got tons of questions, and I'm looking, just on a side note, I'm looking at a person like yourself who's very articulate, very, very intelligent, and I'm thinking to myself, how does a person spend that length of time having that sort of higher intelligence? How did you not sort of click on to the, well, this is really, really bad. What's going on here, or was it not like that at all?
Well, I did a lot of stuff in the independent Scientology field and not in the cult. Because the cult has just too many regulations. And when I left the cult, because they told me I couldn't talk to whomever I wanted, and because I saw that they didn't care about the members, and I didn't want to give money and time to a group that didn't care about me, didn't like me, didn't care about or like any other member either. So I just still wanted to pursue Scientology as a philosophy. I'm not really interested in that anymore, although I feel I learned some things about metaphysics. These days, I describe myself as a Buddhist, a very crappy one, and, and a bit of a pagan, you know. But yeah, a lot of it seemed odd, and eventually I kind of drifted away from it. But I've always supported people's right to, if they leave the cult and they're still interested in studying it independently, why not? You don't have high prices or the disconnection or any of that. And pretty much hordes of other exes and never been in critics hastened to tell me how wrong my approach was.
It was the
And
emotional side, though, Claire. It was the emotional side, sort of. Just to react to what you've said there. You give them credit for their sort of intellectual abilities, but it was the emotional side to you that sort of faded you off because you didn't feel like you felt like you were just there to give them money, but actually, in hindsight, looking back, intellectually, you give them credit.
well, I'll just say this. I don't want to give them much credit because they've hurt more than they've ever helped, and anything that in Scientology is pleasant or decent or interesting could be found elsewhere. except for Hubbard did have some theories of his own as well. But you could easily do without them. Thing is, they're not going to clear up the universe because they can't even save themselves. In fact, they've ruined lives. So all they do, if they had that kind of reach, is screw up the universe. That's all they do. So, but the only props that I would reluctantly give is I think that when Hubbard sourced a lot of his stuff, he made a patchwork. He made it an ideological new age patchwork. And a lot of the stuff that he used are things I really like. They're from, the Vedic, occultism, shamanism. So I even studied a little neo shamanism. It's called core shamanism. And that's what got me interested in all that. But let's say I'd never heard of Scientology, or I had, but I didn't do anything with it. Dad didn't do anything with it. I didn't do anything with it. Uh, I was still gravitating towards Vedic and New Age thought, and I could have done very well. And when I think of friends of mine or acquaintances or people I've heard about who had things happen to them, like being chucked off the ship, into some filthy water, nothing's worth that. If your philosophy is so great, you don't need to do that to people. And, so these days I'm just studying these other things, and I can look at various Scientology stuff, the stuff I do like, and I can see where he got it from. And occasionally Hubbard made some good observations on his own because he had a brain, but he was out for himself even from the beginning. There's a really good book called Dianetics in Limbo by Helen O'Brien. She was active in Dianetics, which is the forerunner of Scientology, from I think 51 to 53, like really early. And she wrote about her experiences, and there's a PDF available online. And when she left, she said to Hubbard, "You're like a cow who, having given good milk, kicks the pail over." That's what she said to him. And she remained interested in Dianetic auditing till she died sometime in the 80s. And, I feel a bit like her, except I feel I don't really need auditing. And,
Well,
but I continue to be
Hubbard's
supportive of people who want to study it independently because they're not hurting anybody.
Hubbard himself, he seems to be like there's a guy in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the Gracie family, and they sort of picked certain things from different martial arts and brought it into one ultimate martial art. Hubbard's a bit like that, except he didn't pick the best. He just picked a few different things that he could put together into this sort of patchwork quilt and said, this is Scientology. But as you say, maybe a few little patches were his own. But essentially, he cherry picked certain things from different ideologies, religions, scientific scientific fields, and put it together and claimed this as his own, as his holy grail, as his Bible, and this is the way you should live. The other question is, I would actually like to get your opinion on this. Do you think that a lot of this was just for to avoid tax? Because it's a religion. It went down as a religion. He didn't have to pay tax, and he made a lot of money, and he's remembered. He'll be remembered forever as long as the human civilization's on planet Earth. He will always be remembered. So, do you think it's got something to do with sort of legacy and avoiding tax?
Yeah, he wanted the tax exemption. He fought for it from day one, and they briefly had it. I can't remember if it was 50s or 60s, but they briefly had it. It was rescinded, and the cult had been fighting to get it ever since till 1993 when they did regain it. And I think that was a big thing. The man had Swiss bank accounts, which he lied about. There's some interview somewhere where he mentions Swiss bank accounts, or he starts to, and he catches himself. And I had heard that Miscavige started out of the blue babbling about the gold. And the people with him said, "What? What now?" The gold. So I think there were a lot of financial shenanigans from day one. I do think Hubbard believed in his stuff. A lot of people disagree with me. I think he did because I've talked to people who worked with him. And there was a guy on Aftermath who also mentioned that he believed that he knew Hubbard, believed in his own stuff. But I guess it doesn't matter because above all, even though he believed in these things or might have, he really believed that he should have whatever he wanted. He didn't care about staff. You know, if somebody writes a knowledge report on you, like they're ratting on you, and it's wrong and it's baloney, the cult will not help you. Their response, they have said that what you do is you go to that person and try to get them to take it back. In other words, they're never going to have your back. Right there, that's proof that they're never, ever going to have your back. And Hubbard wrote that. Not Miscavige, Hubbard.
You see, that's a very good tactic within any cult to sort of weed out the people who might be in there to infiltrate, or maybe people who are having second thoughts of being there. And obviously, whenever you're trying to create a cult, you want people to be dedicated to the cause, whether that be for malicious reasons or for non-malicious reasons. I think that the art of ratting on somebody, we're all here, we're all human. If I do something wrong, 9 times out of 10, somebody isn't going to rat on me, but he wanted that person from that 1 time out of 10, the rat that's going to, he's going to build this religion of people that will telltale on each other. So then essentially you can't trust anybody. There's no brotherhood. It's like it's something that I wouldn't want to get involved with. It's like, you join Christianity, Buddhism, any religion, or it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be a religion at all. Like, you could be an atheist, but you join these groups to sort of have a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a peoplehood. So, you feel that you're one. But in Scientology, I do think that looking into the story a little bit, not as much as Holly. I know Holly's got a few questions for you. It feels like that was one of the main causes of the breakdown, because this, you need to have a brotherhood for something to stick together, or a sisterhood or a peoplehood. It needs to stick together. Does that make sense?
I had it, and I was devastated when sometimes people would be or they'd be rude, I mean, there's actually a scale of ethics actions. And the first is to notice something silently and not say anything. Okay, that sounds good. Then the next step up is to say something to that person. But and then it goes all the way up to, then you write the KRs, and that sounds great. But a lot of people go straight into just messing with you and writing the KRs and being idiots, and I had a couple KRs written on me, year or so before I left, and they didn't even bother to give me a copy, and it was bullshit too,
Isn't that
so,
off policy?
What's that?
Isn't it off policy to not get a copy of your KR that someone's reporting on you?
If I recall, there is a type of KR that you don't get a copy of. I think it might be things that shouldn't be. I know that somebody's going to correct me on that, and that's great if they do. And I don't even remember what kind of KR they were. What it was there were these, what the church does, I like to call it the church or cult of nagging. And I have a real sore spot, you can call it a button if you will, on nagging. I just hate nagging, which has made it very difficult for me in the internet age, because, you go on any site, they start nagging you with pop-ups, and I have a real thing about it. So this guy named Kevin from the local org used to call me at work, every Thursday just before 2, because their weekends at 2.
Gotta get those stats up.
And it got to the point where my coworkers, because we had kind of group phones, like we had a phone on each desk, but they had multiple lines. And it got so that my coworkers would be like, who is this Kevin guy? And one time I talked to him, and I guess I hung up too abruptly. I didn't even know it. I didn't even friggin' know it. And he KR'd me. What a pussy, So this freaking pussy just KRs me. I don't get a copy. Whether it's because he did it wrong or whether it's because it's that other kind of KR, I don't know. I don't remember. I just didn't know. And then there was another lady named Tammy who used to always call and try to get me on course. And I think I told her one time, look, just let me be the one to call you. Well, they won't get their stats up that way. So she called me once and she started with, I know you said don't call me, I'll call you, but, and I lost my temper. And I have a temper. And I went, I don't care if I end up in an eternity of blackness and pain. Will you just stop calling me? And I just went off on her because she's a dipshit. So she went and she KR'd me. Again, I didn't get a copy. So then I get this nasty letter from an ethics officer in the mail, and they're threatening me with a non-interpolation order if I don't come in and do ethics. And then they don't listen to me when I try to explain what happened. And in a way, the guy who was ethics officer at the time, even though he was inflexible, he was a good guy in some ways. He had a little shop down the street from me, which in Seattle, that's not common. They say, oh, yeah, I know. So he happens to have a shop down the street from me. This isn't a small town, but he actually did. And he was a good, hardworking guy. But, he was thoroughly brainwashed, a poor thing. He's passed away since. And he wouldn't listen to me. And so I had to go in and do ethics. And then I started taking courses again and things like that. But I was pretty ticked that these two chicken shits never even said anything to me. So much for the ethics scale, right?
Can you just explain to the people what KR and ethics is? Because there's a lot of people who don't know what that is. So can you explain to them what that is?
KR is short for knowledge report. It can be a commendation one. Those are rare because, how people are. They generally focus on the negative. All people, that's why we have the news is the way it is. People are more likely to tell you if they're mad at you than if they're happy with you. And so there's commendation, and there's a number of them. But basically, you're reporting something about the person that you think the cult needs to know. And also, and you have an ethics officer called a Master of Arms at the Sea Org, or if you're studying at a place that's staffed by Sea Org, like an advanced organization or flag, you're going to see the MAA, Master at Arms. And also, I want to add that it is a crime in Scientology, not a misdemeanor, not an error, a crime to not report a PTS situation. PTS meaning potential trouble source, meaning something's wrong. You can see right there, it's the blame game. Potential trouble source. Like you're troubled, you have a problem, but you're a potential source of trouble to the group, right? So I knew a lady at the local org, and for a while they were rooming with this Scientologist who's very much a heavy hitter in Seattle. And she was renting a room from him or something like that. He was housemate. And she overheard him on the phone, and he was super, super, super upset about whatever. And she was talking about, well, maybe I should, KR it because he needs help, and the ethics can help him. And also, like I said, it's a crime not to report. It's not even like a misdemeanor, like teensy weensy error,
The thing about it is, Claire, right? So just say, right, me and you are both in the cult, right? I know you've done something that's not desirable to the cult, right? I should report you, but I don't. Now I've done something not desirable, so we've now both committed an offense to the cult, so we're both guilty. So
you will receive the same penalties that she does, purely because of the fact that you did not report it.
Exactly.
And it's contradictory anyway, because they supposedly have this ethics scale where the first thing is to just notice it, not say anything, and then the next one up is to say something. But then they go, well, if you don't report a PTS situation, or SIT, Scientologists love to abbreviate everything. It's why I ended up really liking corporate speak, because I've been a Scientologist, and I just love the jargon, so corporate speak, I'm throwing out terms left and right at work, right? Not Scientology terms. But, so they're saying, well, you have to report. And then on the other hand, no, you don't. It gets into, have you ever heard of, with some Christians, the scripture quoting game? Where they just quote Bible verses at each other and they kind of whap each other over the face with it. Well, Scientologists do that too. But the problem is if you have a staff member, an ethics officer, an MAA, you can't give them any pushback. You can't talk to them. You can't say, well, wait, this isn't right. They're not going to listen. I've only had a very few who did. I've had a couple who actually felt ethics was there to help people and they actually listened, but that's kind of rare, it's really rare.
So another, I know Holly's got loads of questions, but there's one question that that I really want to ask, right? Did Scientology help you in any way? And if it did help you, did it outweigh the negatives that were going on?
Well, in the beginning, because I really liked the real basic stuff. I really liked some of the courses and some of the auditing, and that was extremely helpful at the time. But it is it is, even when it's good, it's a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back situation, because so you're feeling all great from what you studied or what got audited on you or whatever, and you're just like happy as a little bee, and then they will come and just mess with you, especially if you're on staff. So anything that was nice kind of gets undone, by the way they're treating you. So I got something out of it, and I met my husband, and that's good because there's nobody else who would put up with me. So, that worked out. That totally worked out. But it's really it's kind of almost 50-50. I mean, because the thing is I didn't experience what some of my friends in the Sea Org did because I was never in the Sea Org. But I have extremely sour and bitter memories of my time on staff, even though it wasn't Sea Org bad. It was still pretty bad, and I can definitely tell you some stories on that. I think that was the part that made it the worst. That made me say, I really shouldn't have been in ever. I was, because of just how I got into it. And then after they expelled us the first time, we pulled back a bit, and that made us not see some of the bad. It kind of worked against us, if you know what I mean. So when you get immersed in it, then you see, the effrontery, and then when you come back and, when you're not immersed in it, you're not going to see as much. And there are things that people who really got, deeply into staff, joined Sea Org, or did a lot of services at Flag even, they can point out many, many awful things.
Well, that's a question. That is a question, and I know you want to sort of move into the sort of the darker side there. You sort of touched on that, saying that you've got many stories to do with, the negative. I don't really like starting off with negatives. That's why I started off with a different type of question, because I understand that there's many negatives to that. But we'll get into that now, and I think it would be good to sort of understand the real dark side. As you say, you have stories about that, and if you would like to talk about these stories, that would be great.
Yeah, and what I liked was some of the metaphysics and some of the drills. I thought they were great. I still think they were beneficial for me, and that's what I got out of it. But I didn't necessarily have to get that from Scientology.
Yeah, and before we get into those stories, there's I suppose it's 2 questions, just to keep myself on track here, because there's so many. Is can a person go from local staff to Sea Org? Can they work their way up? Because when me and Holly, we had a chat a couple of months ago about this, and it was very hard for me to understand. Holly understands it. My head was just blown. And can a person go from staff to Sea Org, or do you need, in my opinion, reading through it, you need like lots of money to get into Sea Org? It's one of those things. Is that if you go from staff to Sea Org, is that like moving up the ranks? Are they what?
Not necessarily. I mean, not really. You know, your local staff contracts are going to be 2.5 or 5 years. I've even heard of 10 years, but they're, you know, they're relatively short. They're certainly not a billion years. They're not even like lifetime. And you can join the Sea Org with no money. Personally, I think they should have money because you get such a small stipend from them in addition to your room and board. And friends have told me there were many weeks where they did not even get the stipend. Okay. You know, it'd be one thing if they really took care of you. Not that I'm in favor of the Sea Org. I think if I was going to pick the worst thing Hubbard did, it'd probably be the Sea Org, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is not true what some people think, that Scientologists have to turn over all their salaries and assets to the cult. I mean, the cult, if they know you have money, they'll try to get it from you. Yeah, but there's no like, okay, I got my paycheck, I gotta give it to the church, or my grandma left me some money, or I own my house free and clear. Yeah, I got to turn that over to the cult. That's not true. That's never going to happen. But and Sea Org, well, whether you work your way up through the ranks, they're like any other org. They're going to break all their promises to you. The only people who really progress much up the bridge, you know, the steps of the enlightenment and the courses in the auditing, are the people who are going to be auditors, because you cannot audit OTs unless you were an OT. So they need to get you up through OT, and they need to get you up through the training side of the bridge, which would be, beyond class 4, which a class 4 can audit somebody on all the grades, which are very basic processes. You know, they're very basic. I found them pleasant, you know. If you're going to be able to audit somebody on the L's, which are not OT levels, they're kind of off to one side, very expensive. You have to be, well, there's some class 12s. There aren't very many, but there are. So, or if you're going to be case supervising, where you review folders and session notes, you have to be that level of the people whose stuff you're reviewing. So that is pretty much the only way. Otherwise, let's say they put you on scut work as soon as you join. Let's say you're done with that and you're not going to be an auditor or a case supervisor or anything like that. Well, you'll get a lot of training on policy at best. Admin, as they call it. And that's it. That's what you'll get. It is not a good way to go up the bridge. Plus, it's grueling. They don't give people enough sleep. Sometimes they don't give them enough food either.
Well, you know, with the sleep deprivation and, you know, starving people is a tool used by many clans and cults throughout civilization to control, because if a person is deprived of sleep, they're very susceptible. And in a dream state, you know, we all have been there. You wake up in the middle of the night, your partner says to you, go down and get me some water. You're liable just to get up, you know, because you're in that dream state. You'll do things. And then starvation, you know, that hunger to keep driving forward. If I keep a person at a certain hunger, it's like motivation and fuel to keep going forward. If I just do this next thing, I'm going to get fed.
Well,
Holly, is there any questions that you have?
I didn't have a question, but I did want to say with the whole hunger motivation thing, when you do get that stipend, if you're not getting fed well in the Sea Org, which you usually aren't, and if it's especially a low income week or whatever, you're getting rice and beans, and then God forbid you're on the RPF, you're getting fucking table scraps. No, you're going to end up spending the stipend that you get in the canteen, so the money they pay you is going right back to them.
It's a company store thing. Or remember that song, 16 Tons? It's an American folk tune.
Yep.
And Ronan might not be familiar with it, but it's basically like the coal miners, right? And the only shops they could shop at were owned by the coal mines. So, and the song goes, and I let's see, I owe my soul to the company store. It is a company store situation. Now, they don't care if you get care packages from home, but they're going to inspect them. They're also going to go through their lockers and stuff looking for contraband, which is like cell phones, you know, and it's, so it is wise for Sea Orgers to have a bank account with some money when they go in for that reason, if for no other.
Yeah, it's like that side of Scientology now is like signing yourself into prison. You're now in prison, and you're
It
buying from
is.
the yeah. You're in prison, and I think that would be, touching on that. That a lot of people who would have joined that would have had, looking at it now, would have been suffering from mental health issues, maybe low moments of their life, and it seems like they preyed on people, that just wanted to better their life. Maybe a lot of people, maybe kicked out of the home. There was a lot, back in the day. If you think about the time frame, you know, there was a lot of people being kicked out of their house because they were gay. Maybe they were different from the normal population, and they weren't accepted. And a lot of these people were homeless, and maybe they weren't, and they just wanted to join like a brotherhood. And now they get into this, and they're in prison. They've signed themselves into prison. But as you said, though, there is two sides to that, because the public side seems to be a bit more free flowing. Yes, there's negatives to that, but whenever you're in deep into this Sea Org, this is where this is very, very dark. And as you said, you have friends that have horrendous experiences. Now, what's the bad experiences that you've had personally yourself that you can maybe pick out in your head?
Well,
Like
let me just circle back to Sea Org super quickly. Every member gets approached to join the Sea Org. Whether they're eligible or not, they're at least approached, as are teen children. And the other thing is, years ago, under Hubbard's administration, you could leave the Sea Org after 6 years without a problem, without a quote unquote freeloader debt. And Miscavige put a stop to that. So, I knew people who they called it cycling in and out of Sea Org. I knew people who did that. So I thought I'd mention that because I think it's kind
no,
of
that's
relevant.
that's quite interesting. No, it is very relevant. Is that now when was that Miscavige or Hubbard you were talking about there? Because when it changed with Miscavige, didn't it?
Yeah. I think so. And I'm certainly not defending Hubbard, but Miscavige um, took away a lot of things and made bad situations worse. Sea Org already was bad. If people who were on the ship with Hubbard have told their tales. But I think it's a little bit like the FLDS, which is a spinoff of the LDS Mormon Church. You might have heard of Rulon and Warren Jeffs. They're worse than Miscavige in a way, although it's not for lack of Miscavige trying, right? As far as I know, Miscavige has never raped a 12-year-old. So they had plural marriages, and they would really target young girls. Usually teens, early 20s, but there are a couple very young girls, like 12 in there. And Rulon, he would let people have like a little bit of freedom, and he was a little nicer, but he still was doing a criminal thing. And he died, and his son took over before he died, and that's Warren. It's very much like a Hubbard Miscavige situation. And Warren, anytime he saw anybody taking pleasure in anything, he would cancel it. He told people they couldn't drink milk anymore. Okay, a nice cold glass of milk, man, that's one of life's pleasures, unless you're a vegan. He told the girls they couldn't ride bikes anymore because I don't know, they might have an orgasm or something on the seat. And I noticed that, and that is a cult tactic, that you see people happy about something and you take it away. There's a lot of examples of that through history. And then, so you had a group, it was already hostile and bad. And all the little offshoots that weren't even captained by the Jeffs family, all through Mexico, South America, they were really bad. But it's a perfect analogy for the Hubbard Miscavige dynamic. where you have a totally institutional bad situation, really bad, with bad teachings. Then a new guy takes over who does all these things, then adds child molestation in. And I don't just mean the 12-year-old brides. I'm talking like little kids get sent to him to talk to him, and he would hurt them.
Is this
And
Miscavige we're
yeah,
talking about here?
no, I'm making a clumsy analogy. I'm comparing Scientology to FLDS
Oh,
in
yes,
that
yes, yes. Sorry,
you've
yes.
got the dynamic of Hubbard being a total asshat and hurting a lot of people and having some extremely stringent ethics policies and policies about going after critics, trying to get as much money as you can, all that. And then you have Miscavige takes over and he's even worse. And it's analogous to what was going on in FLDS in the Jeffs family. Or you have somebody who's just,
But just
as
to actually to define to define the difference between the era of Hubbard and Miscavige, what way, how could you define that? What was, I know you've talked about a few of the differences, but just to actually round that up, how could you define what was the major differences between both eras?
well, I mean, when Miscavige took over, I was a public again. And I'd already dialed back my involvement a bit. But, and so I'm trying to remember. I know one thing he did was uh, just expel a lot of people at the Mission Holders Conference. These were people who had missions, small Scientology centers who were doing great. He made it so that it's harder to get auditing. He put in a lot of rules, roadblocks. So he did that. He did things like I mentioned, where he takes away the 6-year cycling in and out thing. Just and he added all these drills, and he revised all this auditing, and it's supposed to be against policy for anybody but Hubbard to do that, and Hubbard's dead. So there was a lot of that. There's a lot more discipline stuff under Miscavige, but I've had people tell me that they had a great time when Hubbard was at the helm. I was pretty young still when Hubbard was still alive, and but I do remember I saw some ridiculous stuff when he was alive too. So it's kind of like you're not going from good to bad, you're going from bad to worse, kind of.
Yeah, and one thing I can't get out of my head, right? And if you don't know much about it, that's fine. But the contract itself, the billion-year contract, right? I need to know more about this because, what was that about? What were you signing your life away to? What was in this contract?
Well, that was a Hubbardite thing. That was not a Miscavige thing. And I went to a talk, and a lady who alleged that she'd worked with Hubbard, and I don't remember her name, but hang on, I'm chewing the cat away. She alleged that she worked with Hubbard when he created the Sea Org. And he said, we got to have something that really shows their devotion. Oh, okay, a 1,000,000-year contract. Oh, that's not devoted enough. It needs to be more of a commitment, 1,000,000,000 years. I think that lady, she might have really worked with him, but I think she's just pretty disingenuous. She said she knew him when he was in South Africa, when he was working out the Johannesburg rundowns and everything. And of course, it was a talk at the Bellevue, Washington mission, and everything she said was going to be all pro. Anyway, so Hubbard created that billion-year contract probably, I think, before they went to sea. And basically, you're saying you're going to just live there. They call it their religious order, which annoys a lot of people because they're like, what's so religious about Scientology? But that's what they call it. They call it their religious order. And you're going to live there till you die, or if you're too old and creaky and they throw you out on the street, stick you in a low budget old age home.
Well, that's
and then
fitness
you're going to
boarding, isn't it?
reincarnate and come back.
That's fitness boarding, isn't it?
What's that?
Fitness boarding?
I don't think
when
so.
someone is like decided on whether or not they are
Oh,
suitable for the
yes,
Sea Org?
yes. Yeah, yeah, and it's again, you're getting a Sea Org policy, which I am less familiar with. But there are a lot of stories, anecdotes about elderly people being either chucked out on the street or dumped at a low budget nursing home.
And it all seems to stem from KSW saying we'd rather have you dead than incapable.
Yeah, I think they just think these people are in the way and we can't get any work out of them, you know,
Do
because
you know,
they didn't care about any of us.
on that note, right? We can say that about Scientology. We can say that about how they treated their elderly. But you know what? In today's society, a lot of people, a lot of societies, a lot of governments treat their elderly the exact same way, which I think is an absolute disgrace because these people, at the end of the day, whether it be Scientology, Christianity, atheism, it's all in society and they built the past and they built the future, so they should be looked after. And it's that isn't just for Scientology. I'm seeing that all over. Maybe it's not happening in America, but it definitely happens here in Ireland, where old people, and not even old people, but people who just maybe they get sick. They're maybe even 50 years of age. They get sick. Maybe they're just cast to the side, and nobody really gives a shit. I disagree with it. I think we should look after our old people a lot more, especially the elderly, because they built the that's where we got our history from. That's who built the houses that we're staying in, and that's who looked after us. That's who helped us be born into this world at the end of the day. And that's not just for Scientology. That's all over, and that's the thing. A lot of the cult of the world has adopted, really, hasn't it? And it's such a shame. Now, why did you leave Scientology? What was the process of leaving it fully?
Well, when I left for good, that led to my second expulsion, and I said, "Well, you can't really expel somebody who's walked away. It's like firing somebody who quit." I was on the internet, and which is allowed, but I found critical forums, which is not allowed. There's no Hubbard policy, but then again, the internet wasn't very much of a going concern when Hubbard was still alive. And they kept hauling me in to the local org because OSA, which is like their secret police, security, legal arm from LA, kept telexing them. She's at it again. She's at it again. And I said, and then I would go in and I would give them all these quotes from Hubbard, like, that you can communicate with anybody you want to. And they didn't want to listen to me. And eventually that's when I figured out that they didn't care about their members at all, but would continue to ask for money and time and money and time. And that's when I questioned it. But I had quite a few go rounds with them, and they were successively more and more and more unpleasant. And at the time, they were monitoring the hell out of this one discussion group. It's pretty much defunct now. It was on Usenet, was called Alt Religion Scientology. They'd even tried to obliterate that group, get it scrubbed from the internet. And they brought in a lot of critics. It actually made some computer tech magazines at the time. So they earned themselves nothing but more critics, which is generally what usually happens with them.
They're still
So I
dumping
walked
spam on
away.
that to this day.
What's that?
There's now it's Usenet was bought by Google and now it's Google Groups or whatever. They're still dumping spam on alt religion Scientology to this day.
Yeah, and it just got ridiculous. And the thing is, none of the critics were wanting to do anything on there anymore because then message boards became more the thing, right? And then when Facebook arose, there were a lot more. There were a lot of critical Facebook groups, and there's pro Scientology ones, which are vetted very carefully by the cult. So none of my friends go on Google groups. So that's why. The first time we got expelled was we wanted to leave staff. We wanted to break our contract, and they didn't want us to. And there was more than one of us. The mission holder wanted to sell everything and move to Clearwater anyway. And she had money. She had money. I never saw a dime of it. I got $5 for two years of work.
I suppose that's now we're going into the realms of PR, of publicizing and making the cult look good. Two questions for you. The first one, do you think they targeted celebrities to get them in to sort of make it look good? Like you have John Travolta, you have him speaking very, very highly of Scientology. I've heard one story of John talking about, he couldn't have got by the time when his son died. He couldn't have got by that time without Scientology. You have, Tom Cruise, a little tiny, 5-foot guy with a massive medallion. Were these people specifically like small Napoleon? Well, let's call a spade a spade. Or Napoleon, like small man syndrome. Look at me, I've got a massive medallion. Do you think these people were specifically targeted for Scientology? And how did they, in your opinion, how did they get these big stars into Scientology?
Well, yeah, they were targeted because even in the early days when I was in, before Miscavige was really doing very much in it, uh, they always said we want to get artists in and opinion leaders. Artists are so good with the aesthetic arts, and this will be good for them. And they let us know it'd be good for their image too. And I thought it was logical. Well, it is logical, right? Hey, it's so great that it's helping this person with their art, and in turn, that they're when people know about it, they're going to want to get into Scientology. So absolutely, they do target celebs. They also want to target anybody with lots of money. Celebs can be kind of the face of Scientology, kind of like a cosmetic spokesmodel, right? It's kind of like your Revlon spokesmodel, your Sybil Shepherd or whatever. And they're doing something like that, with the celebs. Now, a lot of these, both Tom Cruise and John Travolta were very young adults when they got in Scientology. They weren't kids, but they're very young adults. And they were each brought in by their girlfriends who became their wives. Diana Hyland, I think, was the one who got Travolta involved. She died. I don't remember if they got married. They were very, very close. She got him involved. And Tom Cruise was brought in by Mimi Rogers, who he used to be married to. And as far as I know, she's no longer in the cult. So a lot of times that happens, and then they just stay in. And then you got people like Juliette Lewis, who's from a Scientology family. You've got Chick Corea, who was involved as a very young man. So, you get involved when you're young, and it seems pretty cool. And if you're a celeb, maybe they're not pulling all the shenanigans with you that they pull with people like me, even from when I was a public, when I wasn't even staff. So there's a lot of that. But yeah, they will go after anybody with money, anybody who's a VIP, and anybody who would look like they make a great spokesperson, lend them some credibility.
Well, if on that, right, I think two things I have to say to that. I think with a lot of these actors, I think a lot of them can be narcissistic and they want to be attached to something that's so esoteric. Look, I'm involved with this and only me. I know about this and I'm the hierarchy to this. And, it fits with their nature, especially actors, if you know who they are. Even if you love actors, John Travolta, Tom Cruise and all those guys, it fits with the nature of the actor. Most of these people want to be seen. They want to be involved with esoteric things that they know all the knowledge. And if you listen to Tom Cruise, I actually agree with Tom Cruise a lot that he has to say to do with psychiatry and pharmaceutical drugs. He's right about a lot of things, but it's the narcissism being attached to this. Look at me. This is the best thing that you can do, and this is I am the hierarchy, and this is what you should be attached to. So it's like a grandiose narcissism, if you want to see it that way.
Well, that's
yeah.
the thing. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I don't like the guy because the reason I disapprove of Cruz is mainly because he has hit staff and he has said it's great that Miscavige hits staff. That's my biggest problem with him. No, Cat, sorry. It's that's what I have against him. I think he was so young when he got in. The other thing that makes me feel a little bad for him is that I can't even remember where I heard this, but I had heard that he was backing away from Scientology when he was married to Nicole Kidman. And we know that she never really liked it much, and that I think they were both backing away. And I don't know what the hell Miscavige did, but out of the blue, Cruz has divorced Nicole, only saying she knows what she did, and he becomes 11 billion times more fanatical. Before that, it just seemed like he really liked it and wasn't shy about saying so. And that's when he started using slave labor. Well, there was one incident before. He wanted to run toward Nicole Kidman. Can you see me rolling my eyes? Across a field of flowers, when they were getting married, like this dorky stuff from my parents' time, I guess. And they were running, and they had Sea Org slaves. The cult had Sea Org slaves up till all hours planting all these damn flowers. And that's from an affidavit by Andre Tabellon. So that's one, but he might not have known about that, but he sure knows now. So I feel a little bad that if it's true that he was backing away at one point, and what the hell Miscavige did, uh, and so now Nicole's happy as hell, married, remarried, and he's hitting people.
Holly, you've got a question there, or you want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, this was back when you were talking about the narcissism. Scientology pushes a lot of elite status buttons. Clearing the planet, that's why you join the Sea Org, because you want to clear everybody, you want to help the world. And same thing, Ronan, did you watch the leaked Tom Cruise video from like 2008?
I seen the video, you sent it to me, I watched it, I think that was about 6 months ago I watched that, but listen, it's 100% fine.
Wait. How do I get this back?
You're there, it's right there.
Oh, you can see me? Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
She jumped right on the laptop.
Listen, we love
And now I got all
here.
this weird coding stuff on the bottom.
I'm literally in a place with, I think there's like, no joke, about 40 cats around this house, and it's
you
all
can
different
see me
breeds.
though, right?
Yeah. Don't worry. Listen, cats rule us. We don't rule cats. That cat is more powerful than any Scientology owner or hierarchy that you'll ever meet. That cat can do whatever it's like. We don't tell cats what to do here. Cats can do whatever.
Well, I think she's suppressive, frankly.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I was going to say, if you got code at the bottom of your screen, press F12. I think it gets rid of it. I think it's a shortcut for it.
Let's see. Well, I'll just leave it. I don't have my reading glasses on.
No,
I'll just leave it.
I can't really
You can see me.
Here.
Yeah, but that video, if you remember, I don't know if you got to that point, but he says you go and see an accident and you go in because you know that you're the only one that can really help.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's flippin' stupid, even according to Scientology, because he's talking about giving either touch assist or nerve assist.
And telling
it
the
says,
medics
right?
to shut up.
What's that?
Telling the medics to be quiet so the person doesn't get an engram.
Well, they would still have the engram, they just wouldn't have word content. But the thing is that I was taught, well, the Hubbard reference says that it's assists are only meant to promote healing that's already taking place, as in the person already saw an actual doctor, and the assists are supposed to be given to somebody who's already, his foot's already in a cast, or he's already taken the antibiotics, or whatever the hell it is. So when I heard he said that, and I'm sure he said it, I thought, Jesus, what a douche.
Yeah,
because it's not what I would do when I was still in the cult. I was going somewhere to pick up my husband. My husband was in the reserves then. I was driving longish distance to go pick him up. And I saw a car on the side of the highway, and this lady slumped over. And I didn't have a cell phone back then. And I was like, what did I just see? And I couldn't go back. You can't circle back on a highway. So rather than do anything else, like go on the exit and then turn around and whatever, I went to a payphone and I called, 911. Now I was talking about at work, and I didn't work with Scientologists. I worked with just plain people, and they're like, "Well, why didn't you come and help her?" I said, "In the time I'd waste trying to help her, and I'm not a doctor or nurse, that could be time she needed to like keep from dying, time in which I could have called actual paramedics," which is what I did. So that was pretty funny. They weren't even Scientologists. They're sounding like friggin' Tom Cruise or whatever.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? People will be people. And that's, the psychology to all of this really interests me because I think, given the chance, would, if Scientology never existed, could a person create a Scientology like cult today? Maybe they could. Maybe it's possible because it's the psyche of the people that gets drawn into it. That's why we're talking about it now. That's why Holly's interested, and that's why I want to know more about it. Do you think? Do you think that the birth of social media killed Scientology?
Well, there were already a lot of protests before social media. I would say it's more the internet age has done a lot. And keep in mind too, I was in Scientology when the internet was a gleam in the Army's eye, DARPA, I think it was, right? And I saw even then, and this dates me, so now I can't lie about my age to anybody, right? This dates me that I would say more than 9 out of 10 people who got into Scientology left it. Even then. Then the internet came about, and by the mid 90s, a fair number of people had it. And by the late 90s, yeah, more and more people. And people were posting the OT levels and the Xenu story. And then people were posting about the abuses and the problems. And that was what got me out. I by accident, I found a forum, the one I mentioned before. And I was like, what is this crap people are saying? These must be very bad people. Then I decided after a few months, oh, they're not bad people, they're just mistaken. And then I started getting like emails from people saying, "No, Claire, it's true." And sometimes the emails would be anonymous, but they weren't mean. They weren't mean. And they're, "No, this is true. This is really happening." And it led me to leaving. So, I wouldn't say social media, although that's another refinement, if you will. We already had pickets, protests, but back then, before social media, the cult was able to quash uh, memoirs and different things, and they were able to get eBay to pull listings of books and e-meters, and now it seems like they can't. And now it seems like there's new memoirs like practically every month, you know. So even before Leah and Mike, before Mike and Tom DeVote and other people left the cult and went public to the St. Petersburg Times, I think it was called then. Even before then, there was a lot of activism, and you already had a crappy retention rate. Like 1 in 10 people would stay in, or a couple out of 100. And then that's just the internet put the nail in the coffin. And Leah Remini's show, her wonderful show, The Aftermath, and her podcast, an even bigger nail.
Yeah, she's a wonderful lady, and I think I would love to actually get speaking to her one day. Not even just for a podcast, just to get speaking to the lady because she's got so much knowledge in regards to what went on in those hierarchical situations. But it's fascinating. Like, see, when it comes to squashing any of the negative things, what were you trained in doing? Like, for instance, if as you say, there was people protesting against it. There was people with pickets. There was people, talking very negative about Scientology. What lengths did they go to sort of squash any negative press?
Well, the story of what they did to Paulette Cooper Paulette Cooper Noble, which is memorialized in a book called The Unbreakable Miss Lovely by Tony Ortega. That is a case in point. They did everything they could to break her. And the harassment, I can't even remember all of it. There was a lot. They tried to make her think she was insane. They blackened her name. It's amazing. And like Tony Ortega says, she's unbreakable. But it was certainly horrible and horrific for her. And I know that they got eBay to just kowtow to them and pull listings, but it seems like that hasn't been happening in the last 10 years or so. They have way more clout than I would have thought a cult would have. There's a lot of cults out there. Some are as toxic as Scientology, some are maybe even a bit more toxic, and some are maybe not as bad. I don't see most of them having as much clout. I think they must have some secret heavy backers. That makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, which I'm not. But
I am a conspiracy theorist. I'm one of the biggest conspiracy theorists you will ever meet, but a good one. I'm always open to debate. I'm always open to be wrong. For me, everything's a conspiracy. If you lived in a place like Ireland, you would everybody, even the most liberal of people here, are conspiracy theorists. Trust me on that. But it's interesting to see that the lengths that they'll go to sort of squash all these mad rumors about Scientology.
It's policy.
Yeah.
It says to do that. And it'll always work because we're the good guys, will always win. And it's called I keep trying to say the name of the pop song Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which is not it. It's Blood Sex Crimes Policy Letter, I think it's called. And it's all the stuff that you do to critics.
I was gonna say I can actually look that up if you guys want.
Yeah, work away, Holly. Yeah, listen, if you whatever you want to do, if you want to get certain things up, that's fine. Where do you think Scientology goes from here, Claire?
Where do I think what goes from here? Scientology?
Where do you think it goes from here? Because well, actually, I'll rephrase that question. So, we've heard about them inflating numbers, and that it was once it was a force to be reckoned with, and but now they're actually the information that they provide for us. They've had to inflate their numbers of the people.
Yes.
Where does Scientology? We know the cat's out of the bag now. We know that it's a farce. We understand, and that they have to inflate the numbers to sort of make themselves look big, because as was talked about, it's basically, it's full of narcissism. They want to be bigger than what they actually are. But where does Scientology go from here? How does it? Do you see a resurgence? Or do you see it just dwindling out and never to be seen again?
I'm amazed it's still around, and what they're doing is just milking the faithful, the richest faithful, but anybody they can get for money to keep going, which is probably put in so many offshore accounts. They're not ever going to get a resurgence of like it was during the 50s and 60s. A lot of hippies used to like Scientology because they didn't use the term New Age back in the 60s, but that's basically what Scientology would be called if it was just getting started now. Maybe still evil and whatnot, but New Age. I can't see them ever getting a resurgence. And Miscavige is only a couple years younger than me, than I am. He's not going to be around forever. I'm amazed that there haven't been any more raids. There were a couple raids in the 70s. But there was the FDA raid in Washington, D.C. There haven't been any now lately. If there were, I would have thought that he would take the Nazi route and go running off with a suitcase full of bearer bonds or whatever to South America or whatever. I'm sure he has some very powerful friends, but they're never, ever going to get a resurgence where your average Joe is going to go, wow, this is so great. I know like Est has rebranded itself as Landmark, although it's not really fooling very many people, I don't think. I don't think Scientology can because there's all these policies about how you can't do that. Of course, Miscavige has changed a lot of policies, which theoretically he can't do, but he did it anyway. But they're never going to. I mean, like you said, social media, the internet, all that. It's really, really just putting the kibosh on the cult.
Well, here's one for you, Claire. Right? How about there is a massive asteroid hits Earth. We're all wiped out, and the only thing that's left is the Church of Scientology. Now, thousands of years from now, hundreds of thousands of years from now, they find the Church of Scientology and they say, well, this must be the religion. And then there is the resurgence of Scientology. And this is what I actually believe. I actually think that, if you look at all religions, right, if you look at the religions today, they've all got culty vibes. They've all came from things, what's the difference between a cult and a religion? Well, the leader's dead in a religion. In a cult, it seems to be, the leader's still alive. So this is the thing, resurgence. It just takes one thing. It just takes one thing to get your luck in for these religions or cults, if you want to call them, to have a resurgence.
I mean, Janja Lalich, if I'm saying her name correctly, is a cult expert, and she published a very good list of what makes a group a cult, different things like isolation and whatnot, and I had a friend once say to me, look, I'm Lutheran. I can question, I can talk to my pastor. You can't. And he actually was right. Of course, freedom of speech has always been near and dear to Lutherans since their origins, right? I don't know. See, I think if Miscavige wasn't around anymore, asteroid or no asteroid, have you ever seen crabs in a tank and they're kind of all crowded together and they're fighting each other to get to the top? I think it would be like that. And I think it would be a lot of idiocy. And I just don't think that they'd have to have somebody as aggressive as Miscavige.
Yeah.
Whether the person was nice or not, which they probably wouldn't be. If they were left just with well-minded, well-meaning people, all that's going to happen is no two people are going to agree on the way it should be. And you could never, ever have a functional Church of Scientology without ditching a lot of policies, and nobody would agree on which ones.
So that's their downfall. Basically, that is the downfall of Scientology. There, you've just basically wrapped it up, in the most articulate way. Now, the most famous person to speak about Scientology, or one of the most famous people to speak about Scientology, was a guy called Joe Rogan. And I watched the interviews that he done with the Scientologists, and it was very interesting. But one of the things that stood out to me, he said that he himself went to join Scientology, or to see what it was like. And in doing so, he gave them his address and his details, and he was inundated, plagued by leaflets. And still to this day, he will still receive leaflets about Scientology, or maybe not to this day, but quite up until quite recently. Is that a thing that would normally happen if you were I just came in to inquire about Scientology? Here's my name, here's my address. They would plague that residence with leaflets about Scientology, and they don't let go.
That's true. And even if you stayed in, you become a member and you like it, or you don't like it, but you're a member, they're still going to disseminate, spread your information to other orgs. I used to get junk mail from orgs I never even had ever heard of, had never set foot in. And the only way I hated the junk mail. My husband used to say, hey, if we just had the money they'd spent on all this crap, we could buy a course. So I had a P.O. box that was near where I used to work. And then I moved. My job moved to another local city, and I moved house too. And so I closed the P.O. box with no forwarding address. And then I just wrote to all my, my accounts, my credit card companies, my friends and everything, and gave them my address, one by one. And that was like pretty much the only way I got off the damn list.
Wow, I mean, like that's crazy because the only thing I can relate that to, and it's nothing like it, is the Jehovah's Witnesses over here. If you give your name to a witness, I
We
mean
have
they,
them.
I mean, you mean no? I'm blacklisted. They don't come near my house because I would actually invite them in and destroy what they're saying to me. I'm not joking. You're right. They've actually put a black mark over my house. Do not go near that guy's house. They came up. They came in one day and they said to me, I says, I just got one question for you. I goes, I will join your religion, but would you let my son have a blood transfusion if he needed it? And they said no, because it's God's will. And I said, well, God gave you a brain to make medicine, to give blood transfusions. So you would let that child die? He goes, well, the child wouldn't die. And this is what they're like. This is what these cults are like. They're just, they'll, and that's our version of Scientology over here. And they've just blacklisted the house. So it's the same with Scientology. It seems like it's even worse. They would actually take that level of abuse just to get your time because there's a chance that you might join. There's a chance they might
Yeah,
get your money.
we all had to send letters. They're called CF letters, stands for Central Files. And we all had to send them. And I'd sit there going, I don't know what to say to this guy. And that's why the letters sound so inane. It's somebody who doesn't know you. They're told they got to sit down and write a stack of letters. So sometimes somebody will write something really silly because they're sitting there, I don't know what to say to this guy. I mean, God,
And I think,
how are you? You showed some interest in block course 455 years ago. How's that going?
So I found the policy.
yep. Do you want to share that to the screen?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me just open it in a separate window. I didn't find it in my volumes, but I did find it online.
Yeah, you can work away, Holly. You can share this to the screen.
Okay.
I'm just checking my computer here.
So I'm assuming that this is visible enough for the both of you?
Do you want to? You can share it to the screen if you want.
I did. I clicked share.
Oh, let me add that to stream. Is that okay for you now? Yeah.
I'm not looking at that. Hang on, I've got the whole thing open, so I can't even see. All right, cool. So it is
Oh yeah,
visible.
yeah. We can see it. We can see it
All right,
perfect. Yeah.
so the part that she was talking about was down here, but I do want to read the beginning of it for context.
Mm-hmm.
You can elaborate. Oh, wait. Anyone proposing an investigation of or an inquiry into Scientology must receive this reply and no other proposal. We welcome an investigation into mental healing or whoever is attacking us, as we have begun one ourselves and find shocking evidence. You can elaborate on the evidence we have found and lay it on thick, attacking the attackers only. They do not defend the points that are being made. They do not try to correct them, nothing. It's just attack the attackers. Never defend. Never agree to an investigation of Scientology. Only agree to an investigation of attackers. This was a big error made in Victoria. I okayed an inquiry into all mental healing. I ordered evidence on psychiatric murders to be collected. Non-compliance with these orders brought on the loss of Melbourne and the law in Victoria against Scientology. Victoria banned Scientology at one point. This was the non-compliance that began it. The original order I gave was relayed as, quote, we welcome an inquiry into Scientology, or it was changed to that in Melbourne. This is correct procedure. 1. Spot who's attacking us. 2. Start investigating them promptly for felonies, or worse, using own professionals, not outside agencies. Talk about a bias. 3. Double curve our reply by saying we welcome an investigation of them. 4. Start feeding lurid blood, sex, crime, actual evidence on the attackers to the press.
Yeah, that's the one.
Wow.
Been a
That
while
is-
since I read it.
Can I just say something before? So basically, their form of defense is attack and make lies up and try to dig up so much. So if I'm attacking Scientology, they will drag my history out into the open and discredit me in any way, shape, or form. That's absolutely wonderful, and I actually admire their level of persistence in defending the religion. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, they even have a checklist. Somebody shared it with me. A couple people did a long time ago, and it's a checklist of all different things you look into when the person's an enemy or potential enemy. all different things. It reads like some kind of FBI fact sheet thing. And there's policies that only OSA staff can see. Which so the only time I ever saw them was when somebody posted them, and I think I've only seen one or two, but there's a bunch of them apparently. I've never been OSA.
Yeah, and I think what we've spoke about today is fantastic, and we're up to the hour and a half
Yeah,
recording, and I think for the retention of the audience, that's a perfect timing. And I would love to do a part two sometime talking about individual topics. If you would like to come back on, that would be great.
yeah, I'd like to because we ended up there's so much to cover that I didn't
Yes.
really go into my experiences on staff, and I wouldn't have minded doing that, but I think it's been a great talk.
Well, the next time we will just do a full podcast on staff, no other questions, because it's very interesting. The whole thing's very interesting. You have a wealth of knowledge. It was an absolute honor to get you on the podcast. And Holly, thank you very much for joining us. I mean, you're the girl who comes in here and basically can bring the stuff up into the screen. I could not do that. I couldn't read the stuff like that. I wouldn't even know what to do. So thank you very much for joining us, Holly. Is there anything else you would like to say?
I really appreciate your having me on, and let me know when you want to do anything more. And so nice meeting you, and nice to see you, Holly.
It was good to see you too, Claire.
The pleasure is literally all mine. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate all of you. Remember, smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share on other social media platforms, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Keep it nice, keep it clean, keep it respectful.
Yeah.
And peace.